man.
Welcome to Norse Code, the #1 podcast for your Minnesota Vikings. I'm your host and producer. My name is James Pagoshnik. Thank you guys so much for listening. And at the other end of the tin cannon string, we have our analyst and co-host. You know him from numerous blogs and podcasts around the internet, most notably from theathletic.com. He is Mr. Useful Human, Arif Hassan. Arif, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing well. How are you? Why did I read that like it was like Ron Burgundy with a bunch of question marks in a prompter?
That's just who you are now. And you just need to accept that. That's just kind of where we're at. We just got done recording a special thing for the Patreon people, so check that out. It includes one of the best stories I've ever told on air. So if you're interested in such things,
yeah, probably second or third best if we include the Zoom calls with patrons.
Yes, it's certainly up there. So check that out if you're wondering. Why I'm slightly chipper, some of these episodes do feel a lot like therapy, so I mean it works. Welcome to this.
Except they're paying us for it.
Oh, that's how therapy should work.
Right.
If your stories are good enough, that's exactly how things should work. Welcome to this week's show. We have plenty to talk about. We'll talk a little bit about the Colts review. Obviously, we're a little bit past when it would be considered appropriate to really break down all the stuff off the Colts game, but we can talk about some of the Colts stuff. We can talk about some of the cuts. Everson Griffin is once again a Minnesota Viking. That makes things awkward for at least one person on the staff. We'll talk about that. A bit of a brief Chiefs preview, kind of what to expect, and of course the mailbag. But before we start, just want to thank each and every one of you for listening. Thank you guys so much. We could not do this show without your support and the support of our Patreon people. And there were a bunch of you, and I'm going to explain why in a moment. But I want to thank a couple of people individually here.
You made that sound like, and I will arrest those responsible.
I will cover why this is a thing in a moment. But just wanted to thank a couple of people in particular. Lucas Reisinger, thank you so much. Cream, I write out the pronunciation guide, and then I proceed to copy and paste the actual name. So apologies as I mess up the name. Kareem El-Sadi. Daniel Pearson put up $10 a month because he wants me to suffer. Again, we will talk about this. Matt Murphy, thank you. Wesley Butler, thank you. Natalie Pavlados, thank you. Jordan Hernandez, Liam Harper, Jacob Robel, and again, apologies on this. As somebody with a terrible last name, I'm not saying yours is, but as somebody with a long and very Eastern European last name, apologies. Mark Golovsenko? Sure.
I read that as Golovchenko, but yeah, I feel like you were pretty close there.
One of us got it. Says, I feel heard. You guys entitled your podcast on my tweet. Wyatt's Truth. Arif's breakdown pushed me to finally sign up to support you. Sorry I didn't do this earlier. Thank you, Mark. Thank you so much for sending in the tweet, and thank you for supporting the show.
All right, so new rule: if your question makes it into the show title, you have to become a patron now.
I think that's how that's supposed to work. Yes.
Yeah.
I'm actually totally fine with that. So, why did a large number of people sign up on Patreon? That's
another bad decision by James, which the patrons will know is a historical truth.
Yes, if I'm known for anything, it's terrible life choices. So it was revealed this week that Jay Cutler is starting a podcast.
Uncut.
It's called Uncut with Jay Cutler. You know, I just now got the fact that Cut and Cutler is a part of that.
Oh. Yeah. Oh.
I was merely going off of terrible jokes that could be made as a result of Uncut. So instead, so what I said on Twitter was,
I can't imagine what you're talking about, James.
When I went on Twitter, I said, hey, if we get like $80 worth of new Patreon people, I will review the hell out of this podcast every week so you guys don't have to listen to it. And I will listen to it. I will make notes, and I will recite these notes to my podcast partner and listen to him just be horrified at the show I just listened to. Because the idea of Jay Cutler just going ham on just off the rails on a podcast sounded hilarious. Well, then, like 3 minutes after I post that, we start getting Patreon subscriptions. And I'm
Yeah,
like,
it took no time, honestly.
I was like, oh no, this is just going to keep happening, isn't it? So if we get, I think it's like 10 more. If we get like 10 more, then sure, I will do this. And if you want a sample of what these would sound like, at the very end of the podcast, there's the little like thing that plays us out. At the end of that, I'm putting my first review of the Jay Cutler podcast, which I listened to in its entirety today. So that is going to be that's going to be at the very end of the show. So check that out if you would, and if you like the content, if you enjoy what you hear, if you'd like to torture me more, patreon.com/Norse Code. That is how you will make me hurt with Jay Cutler news and Jay Cutler stats. The short version is it's a very new show. He doesn't know what his voice is supposed to be. He doesn't know exactly what he wants to talk about. He just brought on two radio friends that he has to make him more comfortable with doing it.
They might not even be friends, right? Or one of them definitely is. I don't know. Listen to the post show.
Yeah, it's pretty entertaining. He does ad reads for things that are I wouldn't have expected. I still think he should be doing Manscaped ads with like whiskey and a cigarette in his mouth, but that's just me. Just really just go for your character. But again, if you enjoy me hurting myself and recapping things, patreon.com/Norse Code. We get like 10 more of these. I will do this every week, and they will just become a fixture of the Patreon bonus stuff. So check that out. Also, we just put out a bonus episode tonight with a bunch of mailbag stuff directly from the Patreon people. So thank you guys so much for supporting us. You can also go to paypal.me/Norse Code as well, or you can go to the Threadless store, norsecode.threadless.com, and go over to the collections. So all of that aside, also a quick note, the fantasy lottery is now closed. Thanks to everyone who has sent in. There's a ton of people. I will be notifying you. The draft itself will likely end up being the weekend of Labor Day, as it should be. Anybody who drafts within like the first week or two of preseason, it just doesn't make any sense. You have injuries like the one that you just had over in Jacksonville. Like, why would you do that? So we have the draft lottery. That is finished. I will have the names here shortly. You will be contacted by me via email, and then the draft will end up being the weekend of Labor Day. So look out for that. And I think that's all the shilling we have to do, because now we have a Colts review to go off of. And I guess the first thing I want to ask is, outside of Britton Colquitt and Troy Dye, who really stood out? Because Britton Colquitt was really playing like a guy who definitely didn't want to get cut.
Yeah, right. No, for sure. It was a much better game for the Vikings, so a number of other people stood out in this game. Troy Dye, obvious. I think he was maybe the first player that Zimmer named that wasn't a starter that he praised. So that was good to see. But aside from him, I thought, Bashad Breeland, had a really good game and really secured his spot as the guy starting opposite Patrick Peterson, which, obviously that says, kind of some negative stuff about Cameron Dantzler, but, independent of that, Breeland himself just played well. And that was a sign of optimism. Now, obviously the Colts didn't play a starting quarterback in that game, but, and they wouldn't have had their starter been healthy, but it was good to see, Breeland continue to build on the strong preseason he'd already been having. So I would say he was a winner. Wyatt Davis is an interesting one. It's like another instance where like I disagree with the PFF grade, but we're both very high on Wyatt Davis's performance anyway, so it's not as dramatic, right? Whereas I said Wyatt Davis had a bad game last week and PFF said he had a good game, or 2 weeks ago, whatever you want to call it. And I had to go into all of our differences. I just think PFF was like crazy high on Wyatt Davis, and I was like pretty happy with Wyatt Davis, right? So that was really nice to see because the biggest issue was pass protection, and if you wanted to kind of craft a narrative, which maybe this narrative is true, the fact that he played well late into that game shows that he just kind of needed to get used to that speed, and then he'd kind of adjust, and that's kind of what we saw in the third quarter. I saw kind of like some whiffed blocks, two in a row. Actually, he missed an assignment on one, and he missed his assigned block on one, and then he took the wrong assignment on another. I feel like I somewhat consistently see Vikings offensive linemen take quote unquote the wrong player when they're pulling on pin and pulls. Which implies actually the issue was with me assigning who the right and wrong player is. But like in those instances, like the quote unquote right player to block is the one who blows up the play. So maybe the scheme is wrong. I don't know. But there are instances of that. So, clearly still has more to learn. Zimmer had, a little bit of praise for him afterwards when I asked him. So that was nice to see too. Oli Udo, I'm high on. I thought he and Brian O'Neill had just really spectacular games. I thought that was really good. Armin Watts did a pretty good job. He was okay in the run game. There were times he got washed out, times he held up stout against the run, times he got into the backfield. He nearly forced a fumble on Naeem Hines, which is kind of nice to see. And he got some pressure as a pass rusher, which is kind of like if you see a hybrid 3 technique nose tackle like him, you want him to play like he did in that game instead of how Shamar Stephen has played, where it's a guy that as a nose tackle might not be as good against the run as you expect a nose tackle to be, but makes up for it by being much better at pressure than nose tackles tend to be. And so that's kind of what you want in that hybrid role instead of a guy who's bad at both like Shamar Stephen. So that's kind of what we saw from Watts. He's been having a pretty good camp, not as good as like Michael Pierce, who's just been kind of a wrecking ball, but a pretty good camp. So the Vikings, it looks like they've got a lot of depth at defensive tackle, and now they've got it at defensive end. We'll talk about that in a bit. Amir Smith-Marset, really great returns. Will Raggett was telling me after the game, I think it was Will, it might have been Sam Ekstrom, was telling me after the game that Smith-Marset's best kick return and best punt return, remember, he had 2 kick returns, 2 punt returns. His best kick return and his best punt return of that game, of the 2 of the 4, essentially, right, were better than any kick return the Vikings had last year and any punt return the Vikings had last year, which the punt return one was a little bit less difficult to believe just because like they hadn't gained they had like net negative yards on punts until like week 14 or something crazy like that. But that's wild that in one game he beat out the best the Vikings could do in 16 games last year. So he's a riser to me. Obviously as a receiver, you want him to do a little bit more. But I thought, he did all right as a receiver, at least in this game versus in game 1, and did really remarkably as a returner. So, those guys, Amir Abdullah played really well. Chaz Surratt played really well. Kenny Willekes, I thought, did really well. I thought DJ Wanham did well, but he got called for that penalty, which wasn't a really good penalty call. So, it's kind of a tough game for him, where if that counts, he probably had a bad game, but if it doesn't, he probably had a good game. Stephen Weatherly had a pretty good game, so if that competition is still happening, that would make it kind of difficult because I thought DJ Wanham was ahead. Zimmer says that competition is over. He said right after the game, hey, I know who won the competition, but I'm just not going to tell anybody, including them. I'm not going to tell them that. Which, that's fine. That makes sense to like kind of keep them in that kind of competitive mindset going into the final game. But yeah, I thought both of them looked good, which is good because Weatherly, I thought, has not looked good overall. So those are the guys I thought played well. Ryan Connolly too. Josh Metellus he got injured like yesterday or 2 days ago, but Josh Metellus did well on special teams, and like you said, Britton Colquitt. So those are a bunch of guys.
Well, let's talk about the flip side of that, because it seemed to me like the narrative was that all 3 of the Vikings quarterbacks that ended up playing did not play well, and I don't think I'm alone in that analysis.
Yeah, none of them got over, I want to say 4 yards. I could look up a box score, but I won't. But this gets it across, essentially, that out of the 3 quarterbacks, none beat 4 yards an attempt, which of course means combined they couldn't beat 4 yards per attempt either. Like normally, if you've got like a preseason game with like 3 quarterbacks playing, one of them hits a big play, and so maybe their combined yards per attempt is low, but one of them ends up with a weirdly high. No, that didn't happen here. Kirk averaged like 4 yards a completion, which is alarming. So I I got a comment with in the article that I thought was pretty well meaning, so I engaged it. It was, I think that the narrative that Kirk played poorly is a poor narrative, right? I went back and looked at every pass attempt that Cousins had, and so he went off and he said, "Hey, there's this opportunity in play action where he didn't take. That's too bad. There are no wide receivers with any other separation, right?" And I never looked at the broadcast copy, right, because I was there, so I didn't have to. And to me, I saw receivers that were open. Well, I found access to all 22 and I was looking at it, and it's unfortunate that the broadcast isn't showing some of this because I thought pretty clearly, based off of what I was watching at the stadium and then on the All 22, that that Kirk was declining open options and not going through the reads the way that he should. And so this is kind of what I wrote. So first offensive play of the game, he checks down to Madison instead of looking elsewhere. His primary read was double covered, but the benefit to that is that the guy he's working that route combination with, which is essentially a flat slant concept, was CJ Ham. And CJ Ham is wide open for a first down. There are no defenders near him. It's kind of weird where you're like, I don't think you should have thrown to the running back. That's cowardly. You should have thrown to the fullback. That's Chad. Well, that's kind of weird. But there was no one near CJ Ham because essentially Osborne was running a pick play, and the guy he was picking was open. So Cousins doesn't really have a sense of what that defense is doing, so he misses a really good option there. The next Cousins play, he's got play action. Thielen is open deep over the middle on an over route. I actually did see that the broadcast covered that from the end zone angle. And Thielen was open on that over route. So you can kind of see that. That was pretty deep. And that's the route that play action design is meant for. Again, he checks it to Madison underneath. And it ended up being a free play because there was a penalty on a defender. So, if that didn't work out, it would. But I don't know if he would have known that would happen. So you don't want to say he should have taken the free play. But still. The next play is the one that injured Thielen. So I thought his throw contributed to that injury. He threw Thielen, I think, into contact, and so that's how Thielen got the bruise. But he also that was also just a bad throw because Thielen was well covered. Again, Amir Abdullah has a pick route essentially where he's open in the flat. Brandon Dillon's on a corner route with a ton more space than Thielen. Next drive, very similar story. Could have hit BB deep in a corner, doesn't he? Checks it down. Following play, Osborne's open. That's the one that Tyler admits, Cousins should have hit. So KJ Osborne was so open that he does the Randy Moss, I'm open, and it's because the safety was late to rotate him. It was just a blown coverage. And so he should have just hit that guy. And it's essentially every play. I think the one play where maybe you kind of give him some credit is actually the one that he got roasted for the most on social media and his comments afterwards, which was that, we went 3 and out. It's a game of inches. Brandon Dillon just wasn't able to convert or whatever. And that one, I don't know that he had a better option on. So I go through it in the comments of that article. I talk about the final drive too, and I talk about kind of what I thought he should have done in every one of those passing plays. The conclusion I have is not that he should be expected to make every single one of those plays. Sometimes you don't see a receiver that's open on blown coverage. Sometimes you don't see that the pick play worked or whatever, right? Maybe it wasn't even supposed to be a pick play. It just happened to work out that way. I don't think slant flats are typically pick plays. So, I get it, right? I don't think that you can expect him to make every single one of these decisions, but I think that you can expect him to make some of them. He checked down for every single play. It didn't work. The fact that Zimmer afterwards talked about how upset he was with the offense, and then later in a different presser after a couple days after the game, talked about how he wants the offense to be explosive, that they should be passing it deep, that it's pretty difficult to score if you're only getting 5-yard completions. I think it's pretty clear that was the biggest issue of that game with Kirk Cousins. So would love to see him throw it deep. One of the kind of myths about Kirk Cousins is that he plays it too safe and that he doesn't throw it deep often enough. He has a really good deep ball rate, and he's got a really good accuracy on deep balls. But in this game, we didn't see it. So that kind of narrative reared its ugly head again. There's no point to having Justin Jefferson and Adam Thielen if you're not going to hit them deep. So hopefully that happens. But Kirk had objectively, I shouldn't say objectively, but had a fairly clearly easy to see bad game. He wasn't the only one, but that I think is primary. Like I think, the Rashad Hill sack that he gave up, you have to worry about that. Jake Browning, Kellen Mond, they both played really poorly. I guess Kellen Mond did break 4 yards in attempt. He had 5 yards in attempt. So, bully to him. But he also should have thrown an interception. So, and his inaccuracies were like really inaccurate.
I was going to say, like, if we're going to be talking about Browning, we can also talk about the fact that he looked the worst out of the three. If anybody had something to lose in the quarterback room, it would have been him. And
you'd think that, like, given kind of the scouting report, that he'd have better pocket presence, but he was like bailing out of clean pockets and staying in pockets that had too much pressure. He tried to save a sack, and it's just like every time I see it now, whenever I see a quarterback, like as they're getting hit, try to throw the ball, I can only think of Joe Webb. I've seen other quarterbacks do it success. I've seen, Patrick Mahomes do it. I've seen Matthew Stafford do it. I've seen, average to elite quarterbacks all be able to do it at some point. Right. But I can only think of the time Joe Webb tried to do two different ways, actually. One with his left hand, and the other time that was actually a pick, I think. So, like, don't throw it while you just take the sack. But, like, he did that. So, both of them were awful. After the game, we asked Zimmer, hey, so are you going to sign a guy? Because this doesn't seem like it's going to work out. And he's like, yeah, if we have the cap space, that's something that we would do. And I was just like, wow, I can't believe he just said it. Like, normally they don't just say it, but he just said it.
When you're treated to the buffet of quarterback delights that he was treated to over the span of a 60-minute game, I can get where he's, just filter off at that point, uncut, as it were. Right. No, that's we would definitely put that out there if that was something that was possible.
Yeah. Good game for Chris Boyd, bad game for Cameron Dantzler, bad game for Cameron Bynum. Unfortunately, bad game for Blake Brandel after a really great camp and a good first game. Zach Davidson, terrible blocker at this point in his career. Evan Kazarczyk, who was waived today, had a pretty poor game. Cole Cabral, bad game. Miles Dorn, bad game. So those are my winners and losers. Subscribe to The Athletic to get this, but paying for it.
There you go. Speaking of, let's talk about some cuts. What did the Vikings cut this week?
So there's actually a couple of cuts. Let me pull up because they waived to get down to 79 today. So that was Evan Kazarczyk, who they waived today, and they didn't make like a corresponding move. So they're at 79. They could be at 80. Chris Thomason's reported that they tried out Roderick Johnson. I don't know how serious that tryout is. Former Florida State tackle, arms the length of anacondas, right? Like one of those long tackles that the Vikings seem to love. But they IR'd a couple of players. Like, I don't know if Jordan Scott was part of the group of players that was IR'd, but they IR'd Jordan Scott. They IR'd Janarius Robinson, who was, I think, injured in the preseason game, which is unfortunate. Cameron Smith, obviously, he retired, so that was a little bit ago. They waived Danny Etling. They waived Christian Ellis. But you'll notice that that's more than 5. That's 6. So they signed running back Ito Smith. I initially thought that they signed Ito Smith because he's got kind of the same profile as Kene Wangu. I don't think he's as fast, but he's got the same profile as Kene Wangu. And I was like, oh, maybe Wangu's injury is like a little bit more serious than I thought it was. I did a little bit digging. It is actually a little bit more serious than I thought it was. I thought he was going to start week 1. It might not, I shouldn't say start. I thought he was going to be healthy by week 1. It's looking like maybe that was a little bit too optimistic, but that's not the reason. It's because Alexander Madison was injured, and they would just not have enough running backs for the preseason without Wangu, Madison, and obviously they're not going to do much with Cook. So you would just have Amir Abdullah and AJ Rose, which they did last time, but that was like 35 carries for one running back in the preseason. So now they've got Ito Smith. So now you can at least split the load between the three of them, especially because Amir Abdullah might play a more significant role during the season if he makes the team.
And let's talk about the big signing this week, which was Everson Griffin. There had been a lot of talk, and we had mentioned before on the Manufactured News podcast that this was a possibility, that there had been a little bit of there'd been some rumblings, mostly from him, that this was coming. And honestly,
yeah, actually, yes.
when the news broke that he was gonna, like, it was imminent for him to sign a deal, my thought was, is Everson the source of this news? I'm just curious because at this point, why not, have him put that out there? Like, he's like, no, really, I want this to, like, you fake it till you make it. You just, if I dream hard enough, maybe I'll be able to get back into a Vikings uniform. And he did. He is going to be playing for the Vikings this year. It looks like he did make the appropriate deal to get his number 97 back.
Yeah, probably. So they're having that discussion with the Vikings equipment staff, not like, hey, do you know how to like transfer the name from one jersey to another, but rather, what is the inventory that is right? What is the inventory that has been sold on number 97 Michael Pierce jerseys, or unsold, I should say? What inventory have we had, and what's unsold? Everson Griffin or whoever, somebody has to buy it all. When that happens, and typically it's the player that's taking on the number. So Everson Griffin has to buy that all. He doesn't have to pay Michael Pierce anything. So Michael Pierce has worn 97 essentially his whole career, although he started out with the Baltimore Ravens with a different number because he's an undrafted free agent, and then he took number 97. But Michael Pierce was just like, look, he's meant a lot to the organization. He might enter the Ring of Honor or something like that. I think you might have said that. Made like 4 or 5 Pro Bowls. So, I just feel like, he's joining the organization. He should get his number that he had with the organization back. So those magnanimous move by Michael Pierce. He did not have to do that. I always love hearing stories like that. So, it looks like he'll wear 97. Right now, he's wearing Jordan Brailford's old number, 58, which sucks. I hate it. I would rather he wear like a single digit number. That looks way cooler on a defensive lineman. And Sheldon Richardson's going to have to change his number from 9 to whatever it's going to be. And that just makes me sad. I love that he's wearing 9.
So obviously there is a bit of a quote unquote beef between Kirk Cousins and Everson Griffin because of and who hasn't had a couple of late night tweets go horribly wrong where you call out a former coworker and say that he plays like ass. Like who among us has never had that sort of situation? Oh, it's just Everson. Well, there's some fun stuff going on there. And so what do we know as far as Everson and Kirk, kissing and making up?
Essentially nothing. So Everson apologized to Zimmer. And I think part of that has to do with that series of that thread of tweets where he tweets at the Vikings, Kirk Cousins' ass, thank you. And then he also tweeted, ask Mike Zimmer if he wanted Kirk Cousins. Like, that's pretty huge.
Involving the coach is probably the bigger deal.
Yeah. So he apologized to Mike Zimmer. I assume that part of the tweet is included in the apology. He said he was going to apologize to Kirk Cousins. When we had Kirk Cousins available at the podium, we asked about that, if he's done that yet. I didn't really follow the answer because my impression is that Kirk Cousins had not talked to Everson Griffin after that presser where we asked Everson Griffin if you're going to talk to Kirk Cousins, based off of the things that Kirk Cousins said. But Cousins made it seem like they just kind of talk all the time, kind of, but he never answered the question. But whatever. If his goal was to, I don't want to throw my teammate under the bus for not having talked to me yet, I get it, right? But it was kind of a weird way to approach it. Yeah, we talk, and it's like, okay, but did he do the thing since he tweeted it? Is that? It's like, oh yeah, we talked a couple of days ago, but he said he hadn't apologized. I don't know. So I don't know what the state of that beef is. It does not look like they have gone to fisticuffs in practice. Although, in fairness, it was a walkthrough day on Wednesday. So, maybe they will. We'll see.
I just want to see Kirk just stand over him after he gets blocked on by a miraculous play by the line. Not so much ass now, am I? No, you know what? Scratch that. That doesn't work for his character. Not so much butt now, am I?
Oh, yeah. I think we heard Kirk Cousins swear in practice the other day. It was enough that when someone tweeted out that Kirk Cousins used colorful language, I forget who tweeted that, maybe Chad, and Luke Braun was like, oh, did Cousins swear? Did money go into the swear jar? I don't know for a fact that it was Kirk Cousins or that he swore, but I was there. I strongly suspect, based off of what I heard, it sounded like Cousins and it sounded like a swear word, and it sounded like he was initially. I thought he was swearing at someone, in a kind of a "you like that, I proved you wrong" sort of way, is how I initially took it, because that person had yelled at the offense to get their act together. You can tell it's a coach that said that. But I think he was actually celebrating with that coach that they had actually gotten that thing that he wanted it to do. So, so Cousins will sometimes contribute to the team swear jar. That is on the table. I think for a confrontation with Everson Griffin, I think that does not rise to that occasion in Kirk Cousins' mind.
I like the idea that Kirk's swear jar could potentially be a fantasy name somewhere.
That's good. I like that. It's got to have like 3 nickels in it, right? Like that's like, it's a giant jar, but it's got like a pathetic amount of nickels in it. It's like, okay, the point of the swear jar is to deter you from swearing, but I'm still disappointed in you.
Exactly.
Like, that's how low it is.
Like, God, really? I let my emotions get a little bit too far. Darn it. Oh, there's a second one. Okay, well, let's put it in. Call it good. So, Everson Griffin ended up playing for Dallas and the Lions last year. In this presser, he talked about the grass was not greener. I should have stayed in Minnesota, taken less money. What exactly are the Vikings getting here? Or is that kind of the intangible? Or what is Mike Zimmer saying about how he intends to use Everson Griffin?
So Mike Zimmer said that he is going to use Everson Griffin as the sub-package player, essentially, or a rotational player. He's going to be a third down guy. That's going to contribute as a designated pass rusher, and Griffin essentially confirmed that when he said that they signed him as a situational rusher. So that's it, right? That's the role I envisioned for him. That doesn't mean, like, I think that the surprise, which I essentially telegraphed on Twitter anyway, but the surprise cut could be Stephen Weatherly, not because Everson Griffin will start, but because the rotational role that Stephen Weatherly would play in a situation where DJ Wanham wins the job is the one filled by Everson Griffin. Although now I think that's less true now that Janarius Robinson has moved to injured reserve. So there is actually a spot, because the difficulty we were having is that it was difficult to figure out kind of what 5 or 4 defensive ends would make the roster, because you've got obviously Daniil Hunter, and then you've got the new signing Stephen Weatherly that you presume to make the roster, and then you've got the 3 young guys, DJ Wanham and the 2 rookies, Patrick Jones and Janarius Robinson. But Robinson hit IR, so that might not actually be the case. So it's interesting to see how that'll all shake out. Griffin has a lot of experience as a third down inside rusher as well, so he might be able to contribute there. He has successfully, I would argue, transitioned his game from speed to power. I still think he thinks he has more speed than he does, so that's going to be something to kind of watch out for, to see if that's something that he can kind of continue to adapt his game towards. He played all right, actually, between Dallas and Detroit. Unfortunately, it was his first game in Dallas that was his best one, so that didn't kind of continue itself. But I mean, a couple of people have said that they prefer playing defense in Minnesota than elsewhere. Mackenzie Alexander said it, that he kind of learned that the Vikings actually did have kind of his best interests at heart, which, like, I don't think is true. Like, I just don't think that that's true for like any employee or employer, right? It's just like they have their team's best interest at heart. Sometimes that will align with the employee, but that's what Mackenzie Alexander said. Sheldon Richardson said, that the thing he likes about the Vikings is that they got him paid, which is like classic Sheldon Richardson. Everson Griffin, just said the same. It seems like people actually do like coming back to the Vikings. I think Xavier Rhodes might disagree with them, but like for the most part, people seem to have liked playing for Zimmer or Zimmer coaches like Andre Patterson. So, yeah.
Well, he is signed, likely to make the 53. Correct?
Yeah, extremely likely. Yeah. I mean, it's not a 100%. Like, I'm not going to say, like, he could just not perform in practice to the degree that you'd expect someone as a rotational role to perform, but it's very likely.
Well, let's go over a brief Chiefs preview. This would be like the preseason game to sit and watch. if this were a 4 preseason game year, which it isn't. This is the 3rd preseason game. It is the final preseason game. And has there been any sort of announcement as far as the starters for either team?
Yeah, so the Vikings have said that it's going to be pretty similar to the last game, where we're going to see a couple of series of the starting offense. We're not going to see Adam Thielen or Justin Jefferson. Honestly, we're probably not going to see Dalvin Cook. So Kirk Cousins gets to go out there with the backup running back, the backup wide receiver, and the backup back. Oh, actually, if D.D. Westbrook's wide receiver 3, it's the backup running back, the backup wide receiver, and the backup wide receiver. So that's going to be a fair evaluation for him.
The more Amir Abdullah, the better. Quite frankly,
Yeah.
It's like he has been the constant in the preseason games.
Yeah, like a preseason superstar.
Yeah.
But yeah. So and I think a similar thing for the defense. Zimmer said after the week 2 game against the Colts that he would like to see a little bit of Danielle Hunter or Patrick Peterson or some of the people that we haven't been able to see a lot of. But I don't know. After the Wednesday presser, I'm a little bit less certain. He said that the decision-making process will be the same or very similar to last week, where he wants to have a couple of people play, but he doesn't know at this point yet. And he's getting kind of annoyed with himself for committing to someone and then making a game time decision that they're not going to play, which, frankly, it annoys us too. But, he doesn't want to commit to something that he doesn't know if that's going to be the case. But he did say Adam Thielen's not going to play. He did say Justin Jefferson's not going to play. So, and I suspect we're not going to see. So we're not going to see like probably 7 or so starters. I don't think we're going to see Harrison Smith. Probably depends on Xavier Woods' health. So maybe not there. And then I don't know if we're going to see, Hunter Peterson. We're probably not going to see Anthony Barr. So a number of starters, maybe 8 starters, are not going to end up playing. But for the Chiefs, I mean, Andy Reid is like very old school when it comes to this. They'll play their starters, and they might play for a whole half based off of what Andy Reid said recently. So we're going to see if I guess Tyreek Hill isn't healthy, so I don't know if we'll see him, but we're going to see Mecole Hardman, Demarcus Robinson. We're going to see Clyde Edwards-Helaire. We're going to see Byron Pringle. We're going to see Patrick Mahomes. He played like 30 snaps last week. We're going to see like their stars. We're going to see Creed Humphrey, who they just drafted. We're going to see Joe Thuney, who they just signed, right? We're going to see Orlando Brown, who they just traded for. Right tackle, I think that they haven't like figured out, but they played Lucas Niang last time, so we're probably going to see him. But they're playing like Travis Kelce. They're playing like they're franchise players in the preseason for like an extended period of time. So whatever we want to learn about the Vikings, we'll get like a pretty decent indication in this game. They've got some pretty good players on defense too. Chris Jones is obviously the highlight. I thought L'Jarius Sneed, who's going to be playing in this game, I thought L'Jarius Sneed had a really good rookie year. Tyrann Mathieu there. We're going to see former Viking Mike Hughes. I guess he started for them last preseason game. Kalen Saunders was injured all last year, but looks like he's healthy kind of this year, so we'll see. He's supposed to have been having a good camp. He didn't really have a great game last week. Jaron Reed, who they signed from the Seahawks, Willie Gay, who actually had underrated like a really good rookie year last year. We're going to see a bunch of like fairly good players on defense for them as well.
So that's coming up this week. And I mean, realistically, this is the sort of the time where people are making their 53-man predictions. Is there anybody whose play on the Vikings that we should absolutely look toward? Because this is it. This is where the 53-man cut is done. This is the bubble. Is there anyone in particular that we should be watching as far as this is a battle that is not yet decided?
Yeah, I don't know if Chad Beebe makes the roster. I think there was a lot of praise for him from Kirk Cousins today. So obviously there's something there, but they didn't tender his contract. They had to come to an agreement for a 1-year deal that was less than like a second round or original round tender, which is kind of surprising. And there's just not that much room. If Amir Smith-Marset looks decent enough at receiver, we might not see Chad Beebe. So probably pay attention to him, pay attention to Amir Smith-Marset. The offensive line is set. I'm 99.9% confident we're going to see Oli Udoh at right guard. We're going to see Ezra Cleveland at left guard. We're going to see Rashad Hill at left tackle starting week 1, barring injury, of course, right? So I would pay attention to Dakota Dozier, unfortunately, Wyatt Davis, Blake Brandel. Those are guys that might be fighting for a roster. So I think Mason Cole has basically made it. Christian Darrisaw obviously is going to, quote unquote, make that roster. So those guys are essentially fighting for a spot. Wyatt Davis is going to make it, but where he lands in the depth chart, that's going to be figured out here. Blake Brandel's had a really good camp. He had a really good preseason week 1, really bad preseason week 2. So this could be kind of make it or break it. I think for the tight ends, Tyler Conklin is still hurt. So whoever the primary backup tight end is going to be, we might actually see them play significant snaps this year, especially at the beginning. That battle is still going on between Brandon Dillon and Zach Davidson. Sometimes Davidson takes more first-team reps. Sometimes Brandon Dillon does. The most recent practice I saw, Brandon Dillon was. But there's been a couple more practices where I'd see Davidson take more. So that's going to be interesting. Essentially, I think that's going to be whoever blocks better is going to end up with that job. So we'll see there. Obviously, if you want to watch backup quarterbacks be bad, you have an opportunity there. But yeah, other bubble guys, obviously, if Everson Griffin plays, we want to see how he does. Stephen Weatherly, is he going to win the starting job away from DJ Wanham, who I have as somebody who's probably going to win it? Other bubble guys. Oh yeah. And the linebacker group, like a couple weeks ago, they were all equally bad. We didn't know who was going to play. And then last week, they were all really good. We didn't know who was going to play. So this will be a good game for like Blake Lynch or Troy Dye or Chaz Surratt or Ryan Connolly to really kind of make their case to make the roster. Chris Boyd, Harrison Hand. Hand actually had a pretty decent game last week, but Chris Boyd had a better one. And he had a pretty good week 1 game. So Boyd is basically cornerback 4, I guess. We normally cornerback 3, but everything's nickel now. So Boyd is ahead of Dancer on the depth chart. We want to see how Dancer is doing, so we'll see that. But if Boyd has another good game, it's impossible essentially to make the argument for Cameron Dancer. And I don't know if Harrison Hand makes the roster at this point, despite all that preseason hype. So we'll see with him. That's going to be kind of another bubble guy to pay attention to. So that was like a bunch of guys. I hope that wasn't like I didn't go through it too fast or for too long.
Nope, I think that should be good. Because we got a mailbag to go into. And the first question is from Draw Play Dave, who has an excellent comic, by the way, this week.
Yeah, we'll link it. Yeah.
So check that out. Draw Play Dave asks, did Zimmer re-sign Griffin to purposefully bully Kirk into getting the vaccination?
I'm only going to answer with that comic. So if you want my answer, take a look at that comic. He asked me, can you confirm or deny that that the events in this comic played out as depicted? I'm going to neither confirm nor deny. I'm just going to answer with the comic and let you take your conclusions from there.
Kevin asks, the one thing I didn't include in the show notes because I knew it was going to be at the top of the mailbag. What is going on with Anthony Barr? He's missed a lot of practice and the Vikings haven't disclosed much about his situation. Is he injured? Is it a personal issue? Mental health?
So a lot of people have tweeted at me over the past week or so saying that they think it's a mental health issue. I have no idea where they're getting that from. So I don't have any indication of what type of issue is keeping him out. So it could be mental health issue. It could be a personal issue. I doubt it. It sounds like, based off of what Mike Zimmer said, that it is a physical injury and it is different than the pectoral tear that he suffered in week 2 that kept him out for the season. I don't know what it is. All I know is that we haven't seen him practice since August 5th, and that they essentially told us or implied or indicated to us that he was taking a veteran rest day on one of those days that he wasn't practicing that we asked about. So I have no idea what it is. Your guess is essentially as good as mine. I think we're just not going to find out. I think until September 6th or whenever the first Vikings practice for the season is, and they have to put him on the injury report.
Let's go to Raul, who asks, has Dantzler danced himself out of the starting lineup, or is he playing at the same level with now just better players around him? How has he gone from the number 1 option to, dare I say, the number 5?
Yeah, someone in my mentions, it's 2 people were arguing. This happens all the time, right? 2 people were arguing, and someone was like, man, it kind of sucks that Dantzler is CB5. That's ridiculous. And the other guy was like, there's no way he's CB5. This is just a motivational. They wouldn't make him CB5. And I didn't respond because I do enough on Twitter as it is. That was literally my thought as I saw it. I was like, I could quote tweet it and say, no, I think he legitimately is, but I'm tired, man. I've done a lot of Twitter. I think if anyone has a right to say that, it's me. No, he's the 5th option right now. That's it. That's all I've got for you. He seems to be playing slower. I don't know if it's because he's added weight, if he just cannot run at like his 4.4 speed or whatever his speed is supposed to be. Ran a 4.38 at a virtual pro day that no one was at like 160 pounds or whatever. Because remember, he gained weight to weigh 180 at the combine. And on the PFF live show of the podcast during the draft, they mentioned that he'd gained a lot of bad weight and that he was just running slow because he gained a bunch of weight very quickly in a way that wasn't like designed to increase his strength, explosiveness, or speed. So he probably ran his 4.38 at like 160. And so now, he's above 180 with the Vikings. It's muscle, so in theory is good weight, but he might be slower because of that. It could be another reason. Maybe he's not reading his cues. Maybe it's because we just placed too much emphasis on the 2 games. I think it's 3, but PFF says it's 2. 2 games where he played really well at the end of the season. Maybe that's just variance, and variance at the end of the season always feels like signal. So I don't know, but he does not look like the same player he was his rookie year in camp. And I can say that because he went up against Adam Thielen at times, right? Like he went up against Adam Thielen. He won a couple of those reps, and now he's losing to KJ Osborne. And no matter how good KJ Osborne looks now, he does not look better than Adam Thielen did at the beginning of last year. That's just not the case. So I think he's playing poorer. I don't know why that is. Like he was playing so well that Adam Thielen was like praising him in camp. He was name dropping him on TV. Like they were expecting kind of a pretty good year from him. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of camp hype about Dantzler. Like I remember that from last year. He's not playing like that right now. So I don't really think it's, we have a different view of him because we see these other players around him. Like he was making plays on good receivers. So yeah, I don't know, but he's definitely playing worse.
Also from Raul, if Rashad Hill plays poorly or gets injured early on, would you start Cleveland at left tackle over Darrisaw, considering Darrisaw had has had essentially no on-field time this preseason?
It depends on kind of where we are. If it happens week 2, yeah, I'd move Cleveland to left tackle and move Wyatt Davis up or something like that. Which sucks because Wyatt Davis has been playing right guard and then he has to play left-handed. But yeah, that's or Dakota Dozier, depending on if he makes the roster. Who knows? But yeah, that's what I would do. If it happens like week 6, I'd probably play Darrisaw. It really depends on kind of where he is in terms of recovery and how he's moving, and like because there's physically ready to like go through the physical exertion of playing a game of football. And then there is the integrated athletic readiness of playing NFL football, which combines not just your physical capability of being able to take hits and move at the correct speed, but your brain catching up to the fact that you can do all these things while processing what's happening on an NFL field. And so that's going to take a little bit of time. It's going to be difficult to acquire in practice, but it can be done. And I think it would require a couple of weeks of healthy practice. So week 1, 2, 3, I don't know. I would probably move Cleveland to left tackle and figure out guard. Weeks like 6, 7, 8, 9, whatever, I'm probably playing Darrisaw at left tackle, which would make it like the second time that that Rashad Hill has started and then gets taken over because of injury.
James Kunau asks, given what we've seen in camp and now in preseason, is Kubiak running a neutered offense in the preseason, or is this what you guys have seen in camp, and should we expect this in week 1?
I don't think the offense looks different. I just think Cousins looks different. Like the stuff that the Vikings run is there. There's even like some other interesting wrinkles, like end around reverses, receiver passes, which they did do last year, but like seems like it might potentially be a bigger part of the offense. I've said that 3 years running, it hasn't been the case, so take it with like a boulder of salt. But it seems like this is very similar to the stuff that they've been doing. Cousins just wasn't taking the shots that were there for him. So I think that the offense is the same. Cousins just needs to catch back up to it.
Next question is going to be from Vikes fan 33, who says, despite the negative plays we have seen from him, do you think we have seen enough positives in the preseason and practice to believe that Kellen Mond could have a future with this team as a potential starter?
Yeah, I don't know if this is a mailbag question or someone asked me this question on Twitter or something, but a very similar question was asked. Um, is it or can we or should we already give up on Kellen Mond? Essentially, was another person asked a version of this question. Um, so I'll answer both of these questions then. So the first one: have we seen enough positives to believe that he could have a future with his team as a potential starter? No. Have we seen enough from Kellen Mond playing so poorly that we should probably just kind of give up on this idea? No. There have been some really bad performances at quarterback in camp that sometimes, I mean, sometimes they do result in like surprisingly early cuts. Like, was it like Zach Wilson? I think was a guy who he was like a Tennessee quarterback or something like that. Maybe I got his name wrong. But he was like a third or fourth round pick, and he got cut early in camp. And he just like didn't have it, right? So it is possible, but I think just for the most part, like you can have like catastrophically bad preseasons and catastrophically bad camps as a rookie, and then turn it around and be kind of interesting. We haven't seen any positive indications, I think, that he could do that, but I don't think the evidence is strong enough to say we shouldn't give him a chance to catch up to the speed of the game or whatever. So, you know, if he's a cut next year, I know he's a third round pick, especially a quarterback. If he's a cut next year, that wouldn't shock me based off of what we've seen. But I wouldn't say that we're trending in one direction or the other at this point. Basically, rookie quarterbacks only tell you one thing, whether or not they are kind of good. They never tell you if they're going to be bad. If they play poorly, that doesn't mean that they will be bad. If they play well, they will probably be good. So you don't really get red flags unless they like can't learn protections or something like that. If they literally cannot digest a playbook, you don't really get red flags. You get a lot of green lights, but not as many red flags. So that's my answer to both versions of that question.
Next question is from Ricardo, who asks, has Mr. Udo performed well enough to truly inspire hope, or at least a lack of fear? Or is this a case where we simply haven't seen him be bad in a real game? Therefore, is he at least possibly average?
My first interpretation of this question when I saw this question was, isn't a lack of fear like more than inspiring hope? Isn't it bigger if you're fearless? But then I realized, no, it just means, should I just simply not be afraid? Like, should I be afraid, or has he taken that away? Or is it even better than that? Can he inspire hope? So I get where you're going, Ricardo, but I was just like, fearless about Udo. That sounds pretty good. No, I thought he's played really well. Inspire hope, like as much as a right guard, I guess, can inspire you. I guess a lot if it's like Larry Allen, right? But like for the most part, yeah, I think he's played really well. I think that will probably translate. I think he won't be a disaster. You know, I don't know the answers to these definitively. We only have practices and preseasons to go off of, but I thought that he has played well. I thought that he hasn't really shown any big warning signs of being a disaster. That's the best you can have at this point. And I'm kind of excited to see kind of how he takes that and runs with it.
Ryan Menson asks, given that it seems established that the interior O-line is going to be subpar or worse again this year, what can the team do, i.e. scheme, assignments, play calling, to help those guys out? A struggling tackle can get help from a tight end or a running back chipping the edge rusher, but what can be done to help interior guys generate a clean pocket and not get pushed back into Kirk Cousins' face?
So I don't think that the interior O-line is going to be a subpar again. I think that Cleveland has looked good. I think that Udo has looked good. I think Bradbury looks better, but like that's not... I'm worried about Bradbury, but he does look a little bit better than he did. But yeah, I think it's going to be a better... Like, remember, they had like 2 of the 4 worst guards in the NFL last year. They both played right guard. But like they had like truly awful guard play last year. So it's not really, I think at this point anyway, comparable. It could be, right? Oli Udoh could have just been a practice superstar, preseason wonder. These things happen, right? So like I'm not, I don't know, right? But I do think that our prior should be that they're probably going to be better. So that's what I would say to that. As for if it's the case, like how do you help out a struggling interior offensive line play? Well, one thing is that you can still use that tight end, right? You can still use edge rushers to just kind of move the double teams down, right? So it's not great for your edge rusher to take on your tight end to take on an edge rusher one on one, but if you can kind of double with that tackle for a half second while the tackle then moves to help a guard, that's a thing that you can do. So the tight end can help a little bit. It's not as clean or as easy or as effective as helping with an edge rusher with tackle, just something that the Panthers did with Darrell Williams before he signed that big deal with the Bills. That's one thing to do. Another thing is to just keep that running back in pass protection. Like when a running back is chipping an edge rusher, sometimes they're actually helping that edge rusher. Like chipping the edge defender is like not always that great. And what's interesting is that this is kind of one area where like former offensive linemen and analytics guys agree, but like coaches kind of don't. So it's like weird, right? So offensive linemen and defensive linemen will be like, yeah, I hate getting hit by the running back, but like the tackle expected me to be here. And now I'm here and I've got a free path to the quarterback. And we've seen a couple of highlights where like a guy gets chipped and now he gets the sack. Like that's happened. So keeping the running back just like in can actually help against interior pressure. He'll just take on whoever is kind of like beat the guard. So it is possible from a schematic standpoint, like moving pockets help. Like if your tackles are bad, your moving pockets might not help because you still kind of need them to protect the naked on the boot from the edge rusher. But if a defensive tackle, unless it's like an Aaron Donald kind of guy, is probably not going to be able to both beat a block and chase down a quarterback on a bootleg if the quarterback already has that running head start. So you can do that with moving pockets too. That gets called out pretty easily. Remember, this is how Green Bay beat the Vikings, not last year, but 2 years ago, as well as the 49ers in the playoffs. They just did not attempt to stop the run, and they went directly at the quarterback on those play action boots. So it's not perfect, but like you're not going to have a perfect answer to a bad guard. Like that's just something you have to deal with, and those are ways to deal with it.
Vikings Voice asks, with Pierce looking downright dominant at times, would it make sense to have Tomlinson play the nose and let Pierce attack?
This is kind of funny. I was talking to Will Regetz about this, like the day that we're recording this on the way back from practice. That it's like kind of weird that Pierce looks like the better pass rusher between the two, but Tomlinson is playing the 3 technique. I don't think either of us thought, yeah, well, then maybe Pierce should play 3 technique. No, I don't think so. The reason for that is because a nose tackle has significantly less distance to travel to create pressure than even a 3 technique, a gap and a half away. You're right there. And you don't have to sustain that level of burst. Like even when Mike Zimmer was waxing poetic about how surprised he was that Michael Pierce was playing as well as he is, especially as a pass rusher, that he's got more agility than we thought. I think it's a paraphrase, but that's essentially what he said. He also in that same presser mentioned, and we've got to manage that. And by that he meant like we have to pick his spots when we want him to rush the passer because it's going to take a lot of energy. Because at the end of the day, Michael Pierce still weighs 30 pounds more than Dalvin Tomlinson, and Dalvin Tomlinson's like a 320-pound guy. Like, he just weighs more. It takes so much more energy for him to do that. And if you increase the length of his rush path, that's going to make it even harder. So no, I don't think so. I think you just live with the fact that you're going to get a little bit less pressure from Pierce at the nose than at the 3 technique position, kind of, and be comfortable that your pressure is coming from the nose tackle instead of the 3 technique. Because at the end of the day, if one of them's stopping the run and one of them's rushing the passer, you're probably in a good spot. So no, but I respect the spirit of the question.
Nolan Kaler asks, for North Code, how much value would Mike Miller have on an NFL team? Would he be more of an asset than someone like Chisna?
So he's a fullback and the all-time leader in special teams tackles in the CFL. He has made several all-star teams as a CFL special teamer. He's an undrafted CFLer, so exactly how you want your fullback special teamers to, I don't know, grow up. Is that the word we want to use? To develop, right? I bet he's a better special teamer than Chisna, but like I don't I don't know. Like, I would imagine maybe the Vikings should sign him instead of Chisna. Who cares what his position is? It's like Matthew Slater. Matthew Slater with the Patriots doesn't even practice with the wide receivers. He is a wide receiver, but if they have injuries at wide receiver, sometimes they'll have a defensive back play instead of Matthew Slater. It does not matter. So, sign Mike Miller.
So you
He's
could have
an all-star special teamer.
Yep, you can have Mike Miller out there, and his nickname could be the Chewbacca defense. It doesn't make sense. This works for me. Eddie Crane asks, if memory serves, I like how him saying that makes me think that he's the original host of Iron Chef.
Memory serves.
If memory serves, Xavier Rhodes consistently had poor to mediocre training camps / preseasons with the Vikings and stepped up his game when the real season began. In this mold, who is a player that may have been keeping their foot off the gas throughout camp and will immediately impress in week 1?
Okay, so I actually do not remember that about Xavier Rhodes, but like my memory is very weird about what it will decide to remember and what it won't. So you might be right, but I don't remember that about Rhodes. But the actual question is who might be doing that for the Vikings? Maybe Dalvin Tomlinson. Like just based, the discussion we just had. He hasn't been generating a ton of pressure. Maybe he's like conserving his energy for the season. I think that makes sense for guys who are over 300 pounds. Go do it, man. Your starting job is assured. You're going to get your snaps for at least a couple of weeks, regardless. So you might as well just kind of chill, I guess. I don't know. So it could be that. Maybe it's Patrick Peterson. I don't think he's actually looked all that good in camp. The Vikings say like he is clearly by far the best cornerback in camp. And I'm just going to have to take their word for it because I haven't really seen it. But it could be Patrick Peterson. But my guess is Dalvin Tomlinson. The hope is that it's Kirk Cousins, right? But I highly doubt it.
Next question is from Chris, who asks, is Trevor Lawrence good? Maybe it's a market thing, but I've heard surprisingly little about the Golden Child, the number 1 pick.
So there's 2 reasons for that. One is the market. 2 is that Jacksonville was very late in giving him first-team reps. Like when they started, Cam Minshew was taking all the first-team reps. So it actually took a while for him to have the offense to generate that kind of buzz. But if you follow like all the film nerds, like Nate Tice is a good one. He just started a Substack. So like if you've got a little bit of extra scratch after subscribing to The Athletic and becoming a patron of Norse Code, you, Mr. Moneybags, who's listening to this, should also subscribe to Nate Tice's Substack. It'll make you smarter at football. The Athletic's film guy, Ted Wynn, they all really love what Trevor Lawrence has been doing in the preseason. Like outside the throw, back shoulder while getting pressured, players like about to get hit, right? There's one like 40 yards that was just like, it was beautiful in the end zone. It wasn't a completion. There's another one that was 20 yards that like drew like some disagreement from the people who watched the video on Twitter. But like for the most part, it seems like he is playing very well. But like it took him a while for Urban Meyer to just be like, yeah, I guess you're playing with the ones now. And then also you're out of market. And then, also like, who cares about the Jaguars?
Well, I mean, and this is also relevant because they played the Monday night game. And because Urban Meyer's coaching decisions were very much on display, and it looked like Trevor Lawrence didn't exactly know where everything was coming from. And the question then becomes, is this an example of a rookie quarterback still trying to figure out where his legs are? Is this an example of Urban Meyer being an idiot? There's plenty of examples of that already, but like
there were a lot of tweets about how that offense is like designed from the Stone Age too, which is like interesting because like Urban Meyer is like known to kind of be not like innovative. I mean, he was innovative, but like known not to have stale offenses in college.
Yeah, so it becomes a question of what exactly did we see because we saw them getting smoked by the Saints. And yeah, and honestly, I don't know the answer to that because it looked like Jameis was out there trying to play for the number 1 spot, and it looked like their mystery contract. I don't even refer to him as a quarterback anymore. He's just a contract at this point. Was going out and trying his best too. So like They can still be terrible. They should be terrible. They were the number one pick last year. So that doesn't just change when you end up picking up a new quarterback. Plus, the running back they picked up in the first round apparently is now out for the year.
Yeah. Yeah, poor Etienne. Whenever this happens, I'm always like, my brain does a couple of things. It's like, number one, like, thankfully, this is still like the first response, right? It's just like, that sucks. But number two, it's like, that like thing about running backs getting injured a little bit more often than other positions is going to bear out. And then three is, man, I really don't want to see that take on the timeline. I don't want all the analytics nerds to be dunking on the Jaguars because somebody got hurt. Like, it's like a fine thought, I think, to have kind of internally. I think it's a fine thought when you're having that discussion before the draft to be like, hey, man, look at Todd Gurley, look at ATN, look at all of these players that got hurt. But like the moment that player gets hurt, kind of a weird time to do it. For fantasy guys, I kind of give them like a little bit more leeway on that. I think that they got a little bit too much pushback, but like sometimes they are kind of callous and clinical about it. But like they do have to react fairly quickly from the perspective of their beat. Some people handle that fact a little bit better than others, but like, you know, for like the people whose job it is to like do more measured analysis and they don't necessarily have to react right away, you can like kind of cool it on the ETN injury. Luckily, from the perspective of like how bad can things get with a season-ending injury to a first-round pick, it's not as if the Jaguars lack talent at running back, which, yeah, maybe that's an indictment of the pick, but at least, you know, James Robinson had a really good year last year, one of the best years we've seen from an undrafted free agent rookie running back. It's like, actually, I think Alfred Morris was actually drafted in like the 6th round, but like it reminds me of that, right? So like you've got that, you know, he's not like the speed threat that ETN is, but like you've got running opportunities there. And you can kind of manufacture something with Laviska Shenault to run the ball a little bit. And you've got, you know, Trevor Lawrence is actually not a bad athlete. You can use him on like zone reads and stuff like that. You've got Carlos Hyde. So you've got like pass catching options too. You've got like that's an area where the Jaguars specifically can kind of stomach injuries. Again, I don't know if that like maybe that it kind of explains why the Jaguars are the Jaguars because they've got this much investment here. But like, yeah, there's just like a lot of stuff that's like very weird with the Jaguars right now.
Next question is from Kyle Slaby, who asks, was COVID intentionally developed by a Reef to set personal Twitter fight records?
Yeah, the New Year's resolution leak theory. Yeah.
Exactly. Also, which character from a previous Spider-Man movie would you most like to have in a cameo in No Way Home?
So, if I hadn't seen the trailer, which is pretty good, by the way, like it gets me pretty hyped up about a movie. If I hadn't seen the trailer, I would have picked Willem Dafoe's Green Goblin. Okay, we got that. It seems like probably right. Then if I knew I was going to have that, then I would have picked Doc Ock, right? And like, looks like we got that. So honestly, I'm friggin' good, dude. So, I would probably have to be like some bit character that like kind of doesn't matter, but it would be funny to see. I'm trying to remember the Sam Raimi movies now.
If I mention like Peter Parker's parents, does that mean they have to die in this one too?
Good Lord. I'd like to see Uncle Ben.
He was a nice character. I think that they could really flesh out his arc.
I figured it out. I know the answer. The answer is Bonesaw.
Oh, yes. If we could resurrect Macho Man Randy Savage, that would be perfect.
Yes. Yeah.
There's a professional wrestler out there who actually his gimmick was to pretend to be Macho Man Randy Savage. I believe his name was Jay Lethal. He went by the name of Black Machismo he was African American, but that he went by that name for whatever reason. And Macho Man thought it was hilarious.
That's amazing. I love that, dude. So, wrestling is wild.
Yeah, Black Machismo would definitely be the person I would put in the Bonesaw. He's nowhere near as big. He's nowhere near.
That's great, like because now you're playing on like a wrestling. But like if you have the deep lore of wrestling,
yes,
you really appreciate that. That's
Yep.
good.
Yep, let's bring Bonesaw and let's bring Jay Lethal into this. Damian Barrett asks in a very important question. Question for Arif's newbie NFL corner. What does a safety do? Apparently, I need to know about the position this year.
Boy. Do I have to answer this? Damian, what are you doing? Yeah, a safety. There's typically two safeties on an NFL defense. You can have more, you can have less, but typically there's two. And they play the furthest back. Again, this is all typically. There's a lot of exceptions to these rules, as there is for most of the typical position rules in the NFL. And they play the furthest back, and their job is to design to prevent deep passes, largely. And they're the last line of defense for deep passes or for runs. I hope you're learning a lot about football, Damien.
Yep.
It's an exciting sport that you should not allow your kids to play.
Well, if you're Jay Cutler and you're doing the research on it, yeah.
Yeah.
Boy,
a lot of research.
It is funny just how important safeties are now. I wonder. So I ended up creating a chaos league as a possible idea, a sandbox really, to try out a few ideas for the Norse Code leagues. Signed a bunch of people up, and I made a safety a player and assigned a lot of importance to them. Also, the kicker is very, very important, and I hope your defense shows up to play. So, like, the safety is going to be a very important position. You're probably going to want somebody who does a lot of tackles.
I hate you so much. I hate me so much, because you told me this was going to be a maniacal league. And I was like, yeah, of course, sign me up.
Yeah, like, well, it'd be dumb for me not to play. And then you look at like, oh, damn it. Really? This is where we're at. Christopher Wiley asks, for Arif's beekeeping corner, I have a biology department field station studying bees next to my house. On warm days, the bees swarm around our outdoor water spigot and are a sting risk for my child. How do I keep the bees away without disturbing the research nearby?
You should probably contact the station. I feel like they are maybe a little bit more equipped than the beekeeping corner.
Than Arif's beekeeping corner. You're not. You're trying. The health of a child is at stake. This is where you've decided to stop talking about races and push it to
I
the
have
professional?
always decided to stop talking about the bee breeds. Again, that's the word we're using in the corner, is the breeds, right? I've always decided to stop talking about geographically named bee breeds. I think that the first people you should probably contact are this biology department field station, because it might be the case that if you just like smoke out the bees near the spigot, it doesn't disrupt the research at all. I don't know. You won't know unless you like contact them and are like, hey, I'm your neighbor. I really value all the research you do, but my child could die. So how do we work this out? I'm not saying I'm going to sue you if he gets stung, but I'm saying it's on the table. Maybe don't say that last part until they resist. But like, that's important. So yeah, otherwise invest in tiny, adorable beekeeping suits. That's my second solution.
An infant. Yeah, I want to see like a baby onesie sort of like situation with a beekeeping outfit. I imagine that would work fairly well for the situation. Can we get a listener to go and make a Photoshop of like Arif's head in a cartoon?
We don't need that. That's
in a cartoon fashion.
We don't need that.
On a bee, so we can put like Arif's beekeeping corner on a shirt. Somebody email norsecodepodcast@gmail.com with a mock-up of that, and I'll get you a free baby onesie.
Good Lord.
Let's see what we got here. Jesse from New York. Jesse asks, for Arif's dating corner, I recently matched with a girl on a dating app based solely on the fact that she went to James Madison University. We now have a date scheduled for next week. After realizing that we actually have very little in common, how do you propose I turn the co-host of my favorite Minnesota Vikings podcast is an honorary graduate of the school you went to into an hour-long talking point?
this feels like kind of just part. This is less the dating corner and more the James Department of Bad Dating Decisions. I think
No, 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 no. This was addressed to you. If he does, he's gonna need a wine towel if he gets something from me.
Okay, so you've very little in common. So I presume that they are not like sports fans, right? Otherwise, you'd have a little bit more in common. You could talk about that. Um, God, you're from New York. Like, you can't even say, hey, we both like the Vikings, right? Oh, you don't? Well, you know about that. You're from Minnesota. You can't even do that, right? That I just had the worst open to it. Don't say it like that. But I would probably just not suggest the reason that you matched with them at all. I would maybe not put that out there if you want to date them. Now, if you don't want to date them, that sounds hilarious. Tell us what happens. But if you do want to date them, probably don't say, I only did it because there's a bit on this podcast I like where the guy pretends to be a James Madison University alum and is going to get an honorary degree. That's one of his goals. Like, that feels like not a great way to grab somebody's attention positively. Bring up, oh, hey, you know what's really funny about James Madison? This thing, if you're good at telling stories, if you're not good at telling stories, that's a very complicated story to learn how to tell stories on. So yeah, I would say maybe steer clear of that. I guess if you're really dead in conversation, that date's not working out anyway, then you can say, actually, the only reason I matched with you was this. But like, that's like a bail strategy that allows you to tell us a story. Yeah. I would not. That's low on the list of priorities.
Yeah, between the three of us, the only person who can use a Reef's name to get something out of this is me. So this is not something that's going to work for you. Using a Reef's name in order to try to you know what? Tell you if it works. If using a Reef's name gets you further along in a date, cheers, buddy. That's fantastic. I've never heard of it happening, but it's possible. Let's see, for Reef's Etiquette Corner, this is from Kevin O'Quigley. For Reef's Etiquette Corner, my wife and I are having our roof replaced. You have an etiquette corner now.
I think we've had the etiquette corner before. I think that this is not the establishment of a new corner or a many-cornered room.
Yes, my wife and I are having our roof replaced. She thinks it's customary and proper to tip the crew $20 per roofer. To me, it seems rude/elitist to tip people who are already being paid for a service. Your thoughts?
I don't think it's like elitist. I can see how it's rude, actually. Like I've seen that take before, and people have said it feels rude to be tipped for like doing my job properly or whatever. It's like it feels like you didn't expect me to do the job, or whatever, right? So I did what like a normal person would do, and I Googled this. And sorry, Kevin, I didn't mean to throw you under the bus that quickly, but I would say like, if it makes your wife feel better, it's probably the right thing to do just because. But like, it seems like that tips are not expected, but appreciated. But they really do mean not expected. Not like the passive aggressive Minnesota. Oh, you didn't need to, but I expected this. But like, actually tips are from what I understand, not very common for roofers, but there's nothing preventing roofers from receiving tips. So it is not necessarily customary and proper, but it wouldn't be like so out of left field that it would be rude. So I can't believe I took the middle road on a random question like this. I don't like taking the middle road on questions, but I feel like that's probably the right answer here. I don't know. Keep your wife happy. How many roofers could there possibly be? Like 4? How much does a banana cost? $10?
It can't cost. Here, take some money. Go see a Star War. Tip them. That's what you're gonna do. Just tip them. Let's go to Dr. Aaron Matson, who asks, in the spirit of the new What If series, what if the Vikings had won the 2009 NFC Championship? Would they have won the Super Bowl, and how would the shape of the franchise look?
I think the franchise would look basically identical. Maybe it would be a better like free agent destination in the following years just because it has that aura around it. But like, and maybe they don't ask Brett Favre back in 2010.
No
I
way.
guess.
No way they do.
Well, like if they don't win the Super Bowl, they might, right? Like that's the thing. So we have to answer the Super Bowl question first, I guess. No, they wouldn't have, because Brett Favre would be dead. Like, he got so beat up in that game.
In that world, because we watched that fairly recently. In that, which, go listen to that episode. Whatever you do, go.
It might be our best episode.
It really is fantastic. In that episode, we were looking at, like, Favre is just getting slaughtered out here. So this would have to be a universe in which the Saints do not play like Bounty Gate Saints.
Yeah.
Which is ingrained from a culture standpoint for them at that point. So,
I mean, like, actually, though.
Yeah, so it'd be like a Saints team that didn't have Greg Williams as a defensive coordinator, which I don't think they make the NFC Championship game at that point. Like, the reason they made it to the NFC Championship is because they killed Kurt Warner on the field. That's what's forgotten about the whole Bounty Gate thing, is that the week before they killed he retired.
They destroyed him. Yeah.
He retired immediately after that. It's like, nope, I want nothing to do with this. I have nothing to prove. I'm out. Like, Warner was gone. Kurt Warner wanted nothing to do with being on a field ever again as a result of playing the Chiefs or playing the Saints. So this would have to be a situation where this was not a part of their culture. He was not the defensive coordinator, and I don't think they end up making it to that spot. Now, that said, if that were the case, a Cardinals Vikings would have been very interesting, because the Vikings would have had the better record. So that game would have been in Minnesota.
Yeah. There's two scenarios. Either the Saints aren't the Saints, and when you play them, they, for whatever reason, or maybe the pass protection is just better. Maybe the change in this game is the protection's better and Favre doesn't get hurt as much or whatever, right? Or you play the Cardinals, and I mean, you probably beat the Cardinals in that scenario. So they go to the Super Bowl against the Colts, significantly less scathed. I shouldn't say unscathed, but significantly less scathed. This Colts team was, like, super interesting, right? Because I remember at the time, the Saints and the Colts were both undefeated until, like, week 15 of the season. Like, they were both, like, crazy. They were both going to go for, like, the 16-0, 17-0, 19-0 season that, had eluded the Patriots, like, 2 years before, right? But, like, the Colts were also, like, they, like, won a lot of these games by, like, a point or two, right? Like, they beat the 49ers by 4, the Texans by 3, the Patriots by 1, the Ravens by 2. Like, a lot of they're week 1, they beat the Jaguars by 2. Like, a lot of these games, and then they didn't, I don't think they played their starters in week 17, so the Bills loss doesn't count, but they did lose to the Jets. Those Jets were good, so that's not fair to say, you lost to the Jets. But, like, that was, like, a difficult team to figure out, because, like, by a fair amount of advanced metrics, they were only good, not great. But the record obviously was great. They had Peyton Manning. They had, like, a really good pass rush. I don't think they had Bob Sanders back there, so they didn't have the defense that you're kind of used to seeing. But they had a pretty good pass rush. They had Antoine Bethea. But yeah, it seems to, like, the consensus among Vikings fans seems to be that if Favre were healthy, the Vikings probably would beat the Colts in that Super Bowl. I think that's, like, probably true, but I'm like, I feel weird about the level of confidence people have in that, if that makes sense.
Do you feel like it's sort of thing, like it's maybe 60-40, 65-35 sort of thing?
Yeah, like that, exactly. Like, I like it, you all are a lot more certain than I would be about that. But, like, yeah, the Vikings were probably the better team. You look at opponent adjusted metrics for the 2009 season, and the Vikings come out ahead in most of these metrics, right? The Colts were just a very weird team to figure out, because of, like, that aura of merely having that undefeated season. That doesn't mean the Colts were, like, secretly like a bad team. Obviously, they were very good, but the Vikings were like better, right? So yeah, I think the Vikings probably win. If that happens, they absolutely do not get Favre. If they lose that Super Bowl, I still think they try that again and get Favre, and then you have the 2010 season happen again. But if they don't, I think that I don't know. That's tough, actually, because I was about to say they probably attract a good free agent quarterback, but like quarterbacks existing in free agency is like a super recent development. Like who actually, I'm going to take a look who the 2010 because there would have been nobody, right? 2010 free agency. Why am I Googling 20? I should just go to.
I'll say
to
2010,
Spotify.
2010 free agency. Wouldn't that have included?
It would have included McNabb, though, right? No, he got traded to Washington.
He got traded to Washington. I was about to say McNabb because that seems like because he ended up coming the next year. But
right. God, it's so funny. Like the what if is just McNabb is a year earlier.
Yeah. We go through all this. We don't win a Super Bowl. McNabb's the quarterback, and we're still screwed for a year. Well, maybe we get a higher pick because we can afford. We have a higher pick, so we end up getting somebody other than Ponder.
Oh, that's right. And because McNabb screws it up, and you've got Sage Rosenfels is made. I don't actually. Sage was the backup in 2009. I don't know if he was the backup in 2010.
He was not.
Yeah. So whatever happens there, I have to log into Spot Track Premium to see what the free agency market in 2011 was. All right. I guess I did that. So positions. This only goes back to 2011. It doesn't go back to 2010. I'm never going to know who the 2010 NFL free agents were, I guess.
This is great. If the Vikings didn't end up choosing Christian Ponder because we had the 12th pick, we would have earlier picks. I mean, J.J. Watt was picked right before Christian Ponder. But if you were going quarterback, you could have gone Gabbert. You could have gone Cam
Locker?
Newton if you went.
Or was Locker after Ponder?
Locker was after.
Okay. So it was Cam Newton, Blaine Gabbert. Was Christian Ponder the third quarterback drafted in that draft?
Yes.
And then every non-quarterback had made multiple Pro Bowls.
Yeah, it's like Von Miller, Marcel Darius, AJ Green, Patrick Peterson, Julio Jones, Aldon Smith. Oh, Jake Locker. Never mind. Jake Locker was picked number 8.
Yeah. So good chance they would have ended up with Jake Locker instead of Christian Ponder, which, blessing in disguise because he got hurt all the time, you can move on a little bit faster. So there is that you end up drafting a quarterback. Maybe in the 2012 draft, a historically good quarterback draft.
Jesus. Yeah.
I still think the best what if is what if the Vikings never traded for Sam Bradford? Because they could have ended up with Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah, that whole thing is a really interesting onion to just keep peeling. Okay, so what happens if the Vikings don't end up trading for Bradford? What if they just end up having that one? Wait, that was the game where he was hurt in the preseason, right?
I think he got hurt.
Was that preseason or week 1?
No, I thought he got hurt in maybe it was week 1 because everybody gave up on Case Keenum until the Tampa Bay game, week 4. And then we all realized Case Keenum owns Tampa Bay for some reason.
Yeah, that's...
Yeah.
I was going to get yeah, that's right. I was going to get a Case Keenum jersey that had Tampa Bay on the back. Sorry, I was confusing the Teddy injury.
Yeah.
For the Bradford injury.
Bradford played a couple of games that year.
Yeah. Okay.
So 2017 Minnesota Vikings season injury. So he started week 2 against it. So he did get hurt week 1. Keenum started week 2 against the Steelers. It was awful. Then against the Buccaneers, he demolished them. So I guess that was week 3. And then weeks 4 to 7, he was awful, but the Vikings were winning. And then after that, he was good and the Vikings were winning.
Yeah. It's never boring covering this team, right?
Yeah. So the 2017, you never trade for Sam Bradford. The good outcome is Patrick Mahomes, and the cursed outcome is Deshaun Watson, and the bad outcome is Mitchell Trubisky.
Well,
That's an actual good, bad, and ugly. Where bad as Trubisky, good as Mahomes, and ugly as Watson.
boy, that's quite the range.
Yeah, I think when most people do a good, bad, and ugly, the ugly is just another version of bad. This one is like, that's ugly.
Yeah, that's some super scandal. That's the sort of thing you don't want to include in a top NFL 100.
You would think that, wouldn't you? Yeah, if one were to construct an NFL 100, it would make sense to kind of not do that at all.
Yeah, well, the NFL's wrong. So here we are. All right, that is going to be it for this episode of Norse Code. Arif, let's plug your work.
To end the show. All right. Yeah, thanks for listening to Norse Code.
Arif, let's plug your work.
Yeah, you can find me at The Athletic, theathletic.com/author/Arif-Hassan. I've got a piece on Josh Allen coming up soon. I collaborated with, I think I mentioned this last time, I collaborated with some of the people covering the Bills that were able to ask Allen some of the questions that I brought up in the piece, which is really great. I think it's going to be a good piece. Also, I'm going to have 53 thoughts on the 53 players who make the roster. I'm going to do a 53-man roster prediction with Chad. But yeah, all that going. You can also obviously follow me on Twitter at Arif Hassan NFL. That's it. I don't do any other socials.
So that is going to be it for this episode of Norse Code. Hope you guys enjoyed it. At the end of the little music thing that we have at the end of the episode, there will be a Jay Cutler podcast preview, or rather review. If you are interested in such things, check that out. And if you'd like me to continue to do that, head over to patreon.com/Norse Code and join the Patreon. If we get like 10 or 12 more of these subscribers, I'll do it on a regular basis for the Patreon people. So again, if you're interested in such things, head over there. Otherwise, for Arif, my name is James, and please remember, case cook us. And we'll be back next week.
Did we decide that was the sign off?
Nope.
Or did you just decide just now?
It case cook us.
That's true. That's true.
Norse Code is the largest and only division of Norse Code LLC. You can find Norse Code on the Daily Norseman, SB Nation's official Vikings blog, at dailynorseman.com. You can also find it on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, Stitcher, or wherever fine podcasts are aggregated. Our Vikings blogger extraordinaire and generally useful human is Arif Hassan, and he can be found on Twitter at Arif Hassan NFL. You can also find his written work at theathletic.com. I am your podcast host and producer, and my name is James Pagashnik. You can find me at the show's official Twitter feed at NorseCodeDN or my personal account at Big Mono. If you'd like to donate a few bucks to the show, you can make your one-time donation at paypal.me/NorseCode, or you can make a recurring monthly contribution by visiting patreon.com/NorseCode. A donation of $3.50 per month does get you bonus material from the show and much more. Any questions or comments that won't fit in a tweet can be sent to norsecodepodcast@gmail.com. On behalf of the Norse Code staff, we thank you so much for listening.
Our formula is this. We go out, we hit people in the mouth.
So I listened to it. I listened to it today.
Mm-hmm.
And boy, that is a man who is doing a podcast for the sake of doing a podcast. As somebody who has launched a dozen or more podcasts, both for myself and for other people, there are things you pick apart. Things you expect and things that you kind of catch yourself doing, especially in the first episode. And he fell into all the traps of a first episode podcast guy.
Right.
Doesn't know his voice, doesn't know what he wants to say. Found himself having a very personal conversation that I don't know if I would be like that comfortable with airing, but he is. And turning into the sort of show where you walk away from it going, well, that was 50 minutes. I don't know what it was, but it was 50 minutes.
Okay.
Separated every 13-ish minutes with an ad read. And boy, howdy. So the show itself, he came on right away and was like, I don't know what this is going to be. We'll see. This will be fun. Like, all right, we're off to a good start. You have the exact same tone in your voice as Ryan Leaf did when he came to my campus and was like, yeah, I'm here because I need to be here. I'm here because I need to tell myself that I need to be in Crookston, Minnesota. This is part of my penance for the terrible things I've done. And he proceeded to have on these two guys from a radio show in Chicago, I assume from ESPN. I think he had mentioned the ESPN. And it was like he had been on the air with them before. Like he had a pre-established relationship. He'd been on the air with them while he was a quarterback in Chicago for like 2 or 3 years, which astonishes me. And obviously we're out of the Chicago market, so this isn't something that we necessarily would have known. But the fact that he has done like live events with them, people came to see Jay Cutler speak on the radio, I find fascinating, especially because for a long time he really didn't like the one of the two guys because he kept telling him that he wasn't a good quarterback.
Dope. And
he was like referencing that at one point. He's like, yeah, Jay Cutler really doesn't like me anymore. So can you like he's saying to the other guy, can you like back me up at some point during this? Because I need some form of backup from the world on it. So Cutler proceeds to he is the guy in his 30s going through a midlife crisis, like just divorced. Like at one point, and I don't think this is the sort of thing I would have led with. He starts talking about, or he makes some conversation about like the first 15 minutes are all like catch up about stuff from the old days in Chicago, and then the next 15 start to be about Justin Fields, but then slowly start turning into his dating life and things he's looking for in a mate.
He has no direction.
No, it's great. This is no filter. He's not kidding about this, about the uncut thing. There is no director to go, you probably don't want to put some of this stuff out here. He's got a friendly like relationship with them. At one point they were talking about how the daughter of one of the radio hosts used to watch his kids. So like they're friendly, but it's just it's wild to me that some of these conversations are happening like on air. This is clearly, the beta test to see if they've got something. He wanted somebody on there that he was super comfortable with. And at one point he even said, like, let's be honest, I don't want to be doing this right now. And really, hate fucking your audience is the best way on episode 1 to like get them to adore you. So there's that. And he was talking about he has a team. He has handlers. Like a bear has handlers. He has handlers that were helping him kind of figure out how he wants to do the podcast. He has handlers as far as like social media is concerned. He went on a good rant about how Tom Brady isn't actually funny, and that he has writers writing all his stuff for him. He's like, it's like, I've met Tom. Tom's not that funny. So he's like,
I believe it.
Yeah. Hey, 100%. And the idea that he has writers, 100% believe. That said, it came off a lot more bitter, as you would imagine, running it through a Jay Cutler filter.
Oh my God.
Like it wasn't. If it was longer, it would have been a problem. If it would be more than once a week, it would be a problem. he might just be treating this as therapy, in which case that's totally fine. The last 15 minutes were mainly spent talking about his kids and discussing whether or not he would allow them to do football.
Mm-hmm. That's actually
which is not a question that what's the word I'm looking for? It is the sort of question that you would be asking a former quarterback or a former player, whatever, that made a bunch of money. But he went like he's been reading books on the subject and was like referencing books and ideas on things like he's really thought about this. Like this might have actually been something he asked them to bring up. Like there's obviously no show notes or anything. There's no framework to the show, and if there is, they threw that out the fucking window. But it was fascinating to listen to. Like the first episodes of shows tend to be just absolute train wrecks, and this wasn't a full on train wreck, but it really did have like no conductor at the rail.
I really felt like that this was something that would have been a little bit more professionally produced. I'm actually a little surprised.
Like it sounded okay, except for the fact that it was clearly a Zoom call, and I couldn't tell if they were taking the sound directly from the computer or if they just put a mic in front of the computer. Because the two guys kept talking over each other. It was clearly a virtual guest situation. And the two guys kept talking over each other, and they kept cutting in and out as a result of the internet connection or whatever they were doing. And it was like that part was like borderline unlistenable because it just kept happening, especially the talking over each other thing. I did like wonder at one point, is like, I really am curious. Like they didn't plan for that. Like nobody from his team thought that maybe the three of them should see each other, or like actually have a producer of sorts kind of sitting there. A lot of reasons why former NFL player podcasts work is because they have a guy in there.
Yeah.
You know, and he needed a guy. He needed a guy badly. Once again in his career, Jay Cutler had no protection from what was coming at him. And the result wasn't exactly what he wanted. But like it wasn't bad. It was just all over the place. He might end up getting it more refined, but I'm still convinced he doesn't have anything actually to say. He just wants to be able to say something. He only referenced his ex-wife once. I want to say once. And it wasn't in like a truly negative way, but he did spend a while talking about his dating life and trying to like be like, well, I'm trying to, you know, where I'm at right now, especially with kids, I'm trying to make sure that the women I'm involved with, you know, find out exactly what they're like looking for or like what they're trying to get from me and everything. It was like, yeah, that's a rich dude in his 30s going back into the dating pool. Like, yeah, I'm trying to figure out what exactly these young women actually want to like have to do with me, what they have in common with me. I would bring up the topic of me attempting to date a 21-year-old when I was like 33. It didn't work, and it didn't work for a number of reasons. And I was at one point wondering, what the hell do we even have in common? Like, it was that sort of situation. So the girl that my friends would, when I went on a date with her, would text me the names of songs that came out the year she was born just to piss me off. Like that sort of thing. So
oh geez. Oh my gosh. Oh,
I have wonderful friends, but like the show wasn't bad, but I would gladly do a recap of this show every week if we ended up hitting the $600 level on Patreon.
That's funny. Like, so we still technically have not hit 80 or 80 new dollars, I should say.
Not yet. No, we hit about halfway.
Okay.
Yeah, we hit halfway, which the fact that like 2 minutes after I had made that post, all of a sudden we started getting them in. Like, I was like, is this what happens when a Patreon post like goes viral in the NFL Twitter community? Like, I'm not complaining, but at the same time, really, this is the thing that does it. Jay Cutler's podcast helps me monetarily. This is bullshit. None of this makes any sense. I'm not complaining. I'm just gonna accept this, but it was just a bit peculiar. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Let's go with peculiar. The fact that it just kept happening. That after like the third one, after like the second or third one, I just embraced it. I was like, fine. If this is what's gonna happen, if I'm gonna have to listen to Jay Cutler, this is what we're gonna do. The ads were like weird too, because the ad reads involved some weird what was it? The ad read was for a fantasy, like a fantasy football app that you could also do like all of these other things. It was something I'd never heard of before, and the name of the app didn't seem to correspond with something that you would use for fantasy. Like, you know, for fantasy stuff, you expect like a football name or a basketball, like a sports term.
Right.
Yeah, this was something weird, like a journey or something like that. You're just like,
journey.
I was like, what? I don't understand this at all. I'm pulling up the Jay Cutler show right now. I'm trying to remember what the name. Uncut with Jay Cutler. Still, not a good name. It does not inspire me to,
Of the name of the podcast?
The name of the episode? The name of the podcast is Uncut.
Uncut. Yeah, all the circumcision jokes, yeah.
I get it. It's just wrong.
Yeah. So, like, the whole idea behind that is just to say, yeah, this is an unedited Jay Cutler podcast. He just says what's on his mind. We don't cut any of it out. And, like, as a fan, I can see why that would be appealing, but I have to imagine that someone who does, like, audio content for a living is just like, holy shit, are you kidding me?
Like,
fuck you.
Like, so you're not putting a filter on them, and this is what you decided to put out, huh? This is the content.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
These are the jokes, kid. Sleeper is the name of the fantasy league. It's Sleeper Fantasy League.
Oh, yeah, I get mobile ads for Sleeper. Yeah. The journey.
It seemed like that, like, sort of name. I was like, really?
Yeah, I guess I get it because you know, you've got your sleeper picks or whatever, like your sleeper draft picks that are steals.
Yeah.
Like late round sleepers is a thing, but like it does put into mind like that this is like a wellness app, right? Yeah. That like, oh man, I'm having trouble going to sleep. Is there an app that does like ASMR? Great. Please whisper me to sleep, sleeper.
Exactly. And there's nobody better to do an ASMR ad than the walking, talking Tom Waits song that is Jay Cutler. And like his pride. I don't know if you've heard the ads for Sleeper, but he was doing one, and it was all about how these two bros made this app. Then when they lived on separate, they were friends. They were like next door neighbors or whatever. And then they moved apart. They ended up on separate coasts, but they made this app to remain friends and be able to do sports. And they want to do that for all of you. And I'm just like, is this a personal plea ad read from Jay Cutler? I have questions. I have many questions.
So he did not do a Manscaped ad.
He did not do a Manscaped ad. It was Sleeper and something else. I'm looking up the podcast one page now to see if there's anything else. Here's the write up of the episode. Welcome to episode 1 of Uncut with Jay Cutler. Jay chats with ESPN's Tom Waddle and Mark Silverman about their days. I have to do it in the voice, sorry. About their days in radio together, this year's Chicago Bears leadership under Matt Nagy and Ryan Pace, Jay's dating life, Justin Fields' first preseason game. So this was taped like a week ago. Jay's decision to join Twitter, the NFL's new taunting penalty, which he's against. Sure. Stories from Tom's playing days, the transition after sports, whether whether Jay wants his kids to play football, and a special announcement. Find Jay on Twitter at Jay Has Tweets. He was also talking about how his team came up with his Twitter handle. Like they spent a day of it, just writing stuff on a marker board. And the best part of the whole show was this story that Tom Waddle had about playing in, I think, 1991 and going across. It was a receiver and going across the middle and getting killed by a linebacker. And the linebacker used to play for the coach of Waddle's team. Mm-hmm. And so later in the presser, when they asked, hey, did you think that was a dirty shot? The guy went, no, it looked pretty clean to me. Like, despite the fact that it knocked out your player, and he tore his MCL when he fell, when he was
midair. Oh my God.
It was a great story of like football injury, but at the same time, you're just like, wow, that's pretty entertaining. But yeah, the best part was a gruesome football gruesome football injury story.
Yeah, fair enough.